From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome, Chiefs Kingdom. We have a great show for you today. We're going to talk Combine, what it means, one particular prospect that really has a unique fit for the Kansas City Chiefs. And we're going to get into deep details about the Combine and what has transpired to this point. Obviously, we're going to have to talk about this all week long because there is so much going on with it. But we will get started there in a little bit. First, Chris, what went on this weekend in Kansas City with the 101 Awards?
They hosted the KC 101 Awards, and we already know who took home the MVP of the Kansas City Chiefs, Tyrann Mathieu, and McCole Hardman took away Rookie of the Year, the Mac Lee Hill Award. That was a big deal for both of those guys. They both had speeches that were very good. Clark Hunt talked at the ceremony as well. But that's the big story of this weekend is they hosted the KC 101 Awards. It is kind of funny because there was a 49ers coach that did not want to come back to Kansas City because it's a little too soon from that Super Bowl. You can kind of understand how he's feeling in that. If Kansas City would have on the other end. So you can see why he would feel that way. Honestly, that's the big story. That's the Google News story of the day. Kansas City is going to be in full draft mode. Everybody's at the scouting combine right now, and we will be talking about that over the next couple of weeks.
And we're going to start talking about it right about now because I have so many prospects that I took notes on this particular weekend. It was, for a lot of the draft class, in terms of positional needs, it was quite a disparity. There are some really uber deep, very, very athletic groups at the Combine, including the wide receivers. We've talked quite a bit about the class. And then there are some other groups, say the tight ends, that didn't come up near as athletic. This is clearly a draft that if you need a tight end, you should have got one last season because this group just doesn't have a whole lot to offer in terms of either elite production at competitive levels. Yes, Trotman did put up a lot of numbers, but it was at a lower level of competition. I don't know that you can translate that perfectly like you can, say, from a D1 SEC type school. And there are a lot of guys that just aren't up to par athletically. When you look at the class, particularly for the tight ends, it leaves you wanting because they just can't keep up with what the class had to offer in 2019. 6 guys on the athletic matrix topped 90 in 2019, 0 in 2020. It is just not the same type of field for that particular position as we've seen in years past. And that's okay. That happens. The ebb and flow goes down to each class's specifics. But you saw a lot. You saw some very athletic offensive linemen. We'll talk about them. We're going to talk about one prospect in particular between the wide receivers and the tight ends that is really a crossover that I think fits this team very, very well. And the Chiefs will have an opportunity to try and select him. We'll talk about him in the second segment. But you also saw some very fast running backs. You saw some defensive linemen that are very, very astounding, and the linebacker group definitely showed up, at least at the top end, at the highest picks. So when we get back from this break, we're going to dig into at least one prospect that I think really says a lot about what he could be by comparing him to a current Chief. I really like his advantage that Kansas City could take. So one prospect that stood out to me this weekend, and you've heard a lot of hype about him, a Notre Dame wide receiver that is very good size. He was good size before in the Senior Bowl. He stood out to me on live game film a couple of times late in the year for the Golden Domers. And at the time, I wasn't sure if it was enough production value. I wasn't sure if he was a guy that you could really try to feature in any kind of role in terms of exploitative, in terms of attacking a defense. But he did have a couple of nice plays. Some things that at opportune times he was able to convert, able to make himself a factor in games. And that had stood out for me. He was on my watch list from about mid-October. And Chase Claypool is a guy that has done nothing but help himself ever since that time of year. He went to the Senior Bowl and stood out. Got there at 229 pounds. This is a 6'4" wide receiver, a guy with a lot of size. A guy, frankly, that fits the mold of what the Chiefs have been looking for in recent years. Guys like Marcus Kemp, guys like Jody Fortson, some bigger-bodied receivers that the team has been particularly interested in over the last few years. Felton. There's a number of them. Guys that are actually still around and still possibilities for this roster. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. But Claypool stands out in that he can stand tall with those guys. And as a wide receiver, it was pretty good size in terms of the weight that he carried, the bulk that he carried. Having that armor to go up against man coverage, beat man press, and be able to use his body in some of the possession-type ways that you use to shield off defenders. Part of his game that I think is a little bit underrated. But then he shows up and he runs a time that I can't even actually believe it is accurate. But he is a player that took such a step forward that I am a little bit flabbergasted. The 4.4 range is something that you generally reserve for the most elite of prospects. Those guys that are roughly 195 to 205, they're usually 6-footish, not the overly large receivers. 4.42 from Chase Claypool at 238 pounds. That's 9 pounds up from the Senior Bowl where he stood out and played well, practiced very well from everything that I've heard down there at the time. Went and gained weight and still ran a 4.42. Now, that is long speed that is very difficult to match. Now, the Chiefs are a little bit spoiled. Let's be real here. With 4.27 out of Tyreek Hill, that is a pro day time from back when he was drafted. 4.33 from Mecole Hardman. There is speed to burn on this roster. Put it this way, Sammy Watkins ran a 4.43. Chase Claypool is right in there with Sammy Watkins' speed. He can play the X if he has to, but that's not exactly where I see him being the most applicable, particularly for the Kansas City Chiefs, because he has the size, and I think he can play at probably 242, maybe a touch bigger. We'll see how he matures. When you get a chance to go back and look at the combines from years past, when you see players like Kelce, like Von Miller, they showed a clip of over the weekend that was really, really impressive about just how thin and young he looked in his combine. There's still evolution. There's still size to be gained. There's still speed to be gained. There's still some things that players will continue to develop, and some players have to rely on that. Chase Claypool is somebody that I think can continue to grow as well, put on a little bit more armor, be a guy that can bang in there, not just with cornerbacks and safeties, but with linebackers. And I feel after watching some of his film, and certainly after these testing results, a guy that offers the chance, I would move him to tight end, although in the Kansas City Chiefs system, that's not necessarily a true tight end. I don't see him as an inline blocker. Maybe eventually he could grow into that as a skill set, but I don't think that that's something you have to emphasize. You can make Chase Claypool Travis Kelce Part 2. Because he has Travis Kelce beat in terms of long speed. Their athleticism in terms of change of direction is very similar from what I've seen on film. We don't have the official numbers until the pro day for Claypool, so we won't be able to compare apples to apples quite yet, but we will get there. The strength is about even as well. Travis Kelce didn't come into the league as a devastating blocker. He came into the NFL to the Kansas City Chiefs as a weapon of passing destruction. And I feel like Claypool can fit that mold. More of the move type tight end. Definitely a guy, when you look at the way that the Chiefs align Travis Kelce, can do something very similar. Can align in the slot all the way out to the split ends, can get out there amongst the cornerbacks and just create mismatch nightmares for defenses. Lonnie Johnson from the Texans, I'm sure, can give you some specifics about just what a nightmare that is. And in what we've talked about over the offseason, the short offseason since the Super Bowl, that the Chiefs have a hole at tight end too. Travis Kelce's about to become 30 years old. While I still feel he has a good 4 or 5 years left in him because he was a little bit older prospect when he came out, and he had that first season where he was injured. So I feel like the mileage is not that heavy on Travis Kelce, even though he's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. I think there's still room for him to improve there, and I don't find that much of a stretch at all, to tell you the truth. I feel like this is a situation where you can find another player that has wide receiver skills and speed, but has the body of a tight end, at least a smaller tight end, an H type, that you can bring in and allow Travis Kelce to mentor, because the athleticism part allows for that kind of evolution from where Claypool is now to towards more of a Travis Kelce. Obviously, blocking isn't going to be his forte, but he can grow into that. I think that's technique and girth that he can develop over the coming seasons. I think that's perfectly fine. And I think what was a what I thought was a late fourth round player has now worked his way into the top 100. Now, maybe the Chiefs had him there to begin with. I know there are several teams, from people that I've spoken to, there are several teams that had him in the top 100 already. But this is definitely a possibility for the Chiefs' third-round pick, and a guy that I think is just such a good match for what they have. I'd like to see them take a good, hard look at him, both through the pro day and maybe even an in Kansas City visit. We'll look at that. When we get back here in just a minute, we're going to take a look at the rest of the field, at least on the offensive side, talk about a couple of highlights before we dig in for the week on the Combine and what it meant and what it's telling us now. Beyond the tight end, which is a specific option for the Kansas City Chiefs, I think what you have to take away from the Combine is there were a couple of issues. The primetime schedule, I think, threw a lot of players and specifically a lot of agents off. You saw what I think is an inordinate amount of muscle pulls. Specifically, the linebackers both kind of threw me, with Queen as well as Murray pulling some hamstrings. Evidently, Queen's going to be all right. They were worried to the point where they went and did an MRI just to verify that, but it looks like he's going to be all right. Ken Murray, I think, is a guy that the more tape that I watch, the more I like him, the better a fit I think he is in Kansas City, and I don't think that Simmons or Queen is going to give ground across the league. I think they will still continue to be the top two linebackers in the field, and I believe that other teams will select them high. I believe Ken Murray will be available at 32. I think that's a viable option. Does he slip past? I could see him down as low as mid-40s in a possibility, but I really don't think that's going to be the case. It would have to be a specific scenario for that. So you come back to needs versus wants versus those are two guys that stood out. I thought they both ran well. I think Malik Harrison ran well as well. We'll go over the athletic matrices for all these players as we go through the next couple of weeks. You don't have to worry about that. But I think they ran well. I think some of the tackles ran well. Mekhi Becton, obviously, is a gargantuan man that ran just about as well as you could ever hope for an offensive lineman. I think that says a lot about his training technique. I think it says a lot about him as an athlete. And it seems like from people that I trust in terms of their film grades that they were already high on him. So that's kind of checking a box and really just making it that much more of a slam dunk. I am happy with him. I've watched a little bit of film, and I don't think the Chiefs are going to be in position to really try to go after an offensive tackle early. Now, should they trade back and develop more picks, I think that could definitely be an option, but I don't think it has to be a necessity. There are a couple of other offensive line standouts. One guy that I think really does fit what the Chiefs like, and you've seen this because over the weekend, Cam Irving's option, we found out from Therese Paylor, is not going to be picked up by the team. That's going to save them about $3.2 million against the cap. And we can't say that we're 100% surprised, but they have backed him quite a bit over the years. And he's not an elite level blocker. They've continued to try to put him at tackle when he is a guard, that he needs to be in that phone booth. Evidently, his run with the Chiefs has come to an end. That's going to save them some money. That means that they're gearing up to use that money somewhere. Evidently, the tag will be placed on Chris Jones, but they're also negotiating with him, so that makes a lot of sense. There's also a big need at cornerback, and we've heard both from the beat reporters as well as from Brett Veach, as well as from outsiders outside of the Chiefs beat. The Chiefs are very heavily invested in looking at the cornerback group. They have a lot of need there. I think free agency may be part of that as well. So that money for Cam Irving may end up going to a cornerback that they acquire. We talked last week about Chris Harrison, the possibility there. I still feel that that's on the table. We're going to get into that later in the week when we start to hear a little bit more about the tags having been actually applied and where that's going from there. But that brings me back to you're losing an experienced backup offensive lineman, and there are a lot in there. He's a guy that was athletic in terms of testing, never was a force they thought he would be, Cam Irving, on the field. There's another guy in there that tested very, very well, way above what I expected, played out at Boise, and is somebody that I think the Chiefs, when you look at the way that they drafted Eric Fisher, a guy that was very athletic, was a little bit underwhelming in terms of his strength, especially his functional strength, and they were okay developing him and allowing him to grow into not only his body but his role. And I feel like that is something that they could very easily do, especially knowing that they have Schwartz and Fisher on the hook for a while. They could invest in a guy like Ezra Cleveland and try to bring him in and allow him to develop, give him a couple of years. Now, is he a first-round pick? Not at all. Could he be there at 63? I definitely think so. He could even be there in the third round, but I don't expect the Chiefs to only be picking at 32 and 63. So there will be more options there as well. But he's a name to keep an eye on. He tested very well. I thought, really, in terms of overall, you can't take anything away from the performance that Tristan Wirfs put out. He is clearly, at his size, 320 pounds, almost 6'5". Tristan Wirfs is a rare breed. I mean, going all the way back to a number of players that we haven't seen the likes of before. Tristan Wirfs is that kind of athlete. I do believe that he will stay at tackle in the NFL. It may even be left tackle. If it were to happen, I would not be surprised to see somebody flip him over to the other side. But his athleticism really stood out, and I think that that's earned him the right to play tackle. But the guy right behind him in terms of athleticism is Ezra Cleveland. And he's a guy I haven't done any film on. I will tell you guys that right now. I intend to do that very quickly because I think he's going to be somewhere between 55 and 95 in terms of his selection. Squarely in the middle of the third round, could creep one way or the other. That's where I expect him right now. A lot of positive comments about Ezra Cleveland coming out of Indianapolis. Another guy that tested very well that is on the Chiefs fans' radar. I'm not sure he's on the Chiefs' radar, and that is Cesar Ruiz out of Michigan. Their center, 307, just a hair under 6'3". A guy that put up numbers that are right in line in terms of power, explosion, and short area quickness with the best two offensive linemen that the Chiefs have selected in the Andy Reid era. And that is Laurent Duvernay-Tardif and Mitch Morse. Cesar Ruiz is right in there with them in terms of overall athleticism across all of those boards. He's a guy that fits a need for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think he's going to be gone in the first round, and I don't think the Chiefs are going to spend a first-round selection on a center. But just a name to keep out there in case you see some things change. The cornerback group is definitely where all the heat is. There's a lot of linebackers at play as well. Not so much on the edges. I thought this combine was a little bit light for the edge group. And I feel like, quite frankly, the most intriguing prospects I saw out of the two groups, that the actual D linemen and the ones they consider edges, a couple of those guys are really meant to be five techniques that can maybe play Spags power defensive end. I will throw some of those names out as we go over defense tomorrow. But at this point, I feel like some of the hype of what the wide receivers were able to do, including Ruggs and his 4.27, I think it was official. I'll have to double check that. That is putting him apart to the point that is just pretty incredible. As good as the wide receiver group was, I feel like there were some holes, not only at tight end. I feel like there were a couple of standouts in the running back group, but not overly huge. And I feel like the offensive line group, we've talked about them. The quarterbacks are the quarterbacks. We're not going to get into those because of, PM 15. Don't have to worry about that at this point. Tomorrow we're going to come back. We're going to talk defense. There is a ton to go over there, and I haven't even finished at this point on Sunday evening crunching all the numbers for the defensive side of the ball because the DBs just finished up relatively shortly ago, and I haven't even gotten all the data done. So there will be a lot of development, a lot of updates coming in the next week for the defensive side of the ball. But I hope you guys enjoyed the combine. It's always enlightening to see guys move in the same kind of drill at the same time, back to back, so you can see them in direct competition. No, it's not on-field play. No, it's not that functional inside of pads and helmet and everything else. But it does allow you to see natural movement, who is natural, who's smooth. Smooth's the word of the weekend for me. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. I appreciate you guys. If you have comments, hit at Locked On Chiefs on Twitter. Let us know what you thought of the Combine and who stood out to you. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll go over the defense and continue digging through about who fits the Kansas City Chiefs now that they're trying to rebuild what are a number of holes in order to get back to Super Bowl 55. We're looking forward to that. I hope you guys are too. Thanks for listening today, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Ryan Tracy is the founder of Rogue Analytics and the host of RGR Football on YouTube. Follow him there. Chris Clark is a senior analyst at ChiefsDigest.com, where you can get his work. Rate and review at Apple Podcasts and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.